All right, where do we go from here? Okay, I have an old-fashioned letter, and that's another thing. I'm faster on the old-fashioned letters than I am the emails because when I get a letter in the mail, I open it, right? It's what you do immediately. Where with emails, they just stack up and you know they're there, but you're like, I don't want to with that. But anyway, this is on paper, as you can tell, from Jonathan Ramos in Bayonne, New Jersey, who writes, well, I'll paraphrase this because he wrote a long question, but he had heard us talking at one point about, I guess it was one of the OVW deep dives or in some talk about OVW or the developmental program at the time. So we specifically, and it was Danny Davis, made it known he would not book anyone on the OVW program that worked for Ian Rotten, doing the IWA deathmatch hoo-ha that nearly killed a wrestling business in the state of Kentucky. And so he was asking about that. And he said in a time where the internet was still new, if someone did work a non-deathmatch show, were they still excluded? And what if they humbly approached you asking to be booked? And he gives an example that, well, now this guy that's a pretty decent talent worked on for a deathmatch promotion here recently, but it wasn't a deathmatch on that show or whatever. And I thought it might be interesting to bring up, not only in this case or more modern times, but you know, a lot of stories you hear from the wrestlers is the promoters were crooked and they screwed all the boys and they, you know, kept all the money for themselves and they never got their due and the promoters would blackball the guys, right? And sometimes you hear, but not often, that the boys sometimes were not all innocent and would try to fuck the promoters or did fuck the promoters or try to steal the territory or whatever. Both these things could be true and sometimes at the same time, and sometimes for different reasons. In a lot of cases, the promoters did blackball and or try to blackball and or fuck the guys around and or prevent them from making a living. And in some cases, not quite as often because the guys sometimes, you know, couldn't get that much pull or power, but they did try to steal the territory or fuck a promoter around by holding him up. We've told the stories, holding him up for more money or getting mad and no showing and walking out or whatever the case. We've told all these stories. But there were also, in some cases, legitimate reasons for things that were done to allegedly blackball somebody because that was the way. The modern fans, Brian, I don't think understand that there were absolutely, not only were there no contracts for the most part in 98% of the time in the territory days, and only, you know, rarely in the previous days where a guy like Jack Pfeffer would actually sign guys and be a traveling booking office or whatever. But there were no contracts. There were no written agreements. There were no guarantees until a wrestler got either in the office as part of either by buying a piece of the office or by being given a piece because he was a big draw, Lawler in Memphis, Jack Briscoe in Atlanta in the war, blah, blah, blah. You didn't have a guarantee of anything. It was just whatever the promoter was going to pay you based on whether you were drawing money and whether the territory was drawing money, and the preliminary guys got preliminary money. And in some cases, for example, with OVW on a smaller scale, Danny Davis made the decision because this other promotion had gotten such a bad reputation, was doing all the blood and the violence and the bullshit and being called before the commission and getting kicked out of buildings. If you're trying to run a promotion that doesn't do that shit and want to be clear of heat with the government and the commission and regulation and be left alone, blah, 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 and because you want to have a distinct identity for your company and your territory or your promotion, you don't want to just advertise the same guys that they see on this other show in other parts of town or the same market. So there's no clear distinction. And this is what's been lost with independent wrestling over the last, 25 or 30 years since it's become a big thing, especially in the Northeast, is independent promotions book guys that work every fucking where, even in the same market for multiple other promoters. That was not allowed for various reasons. If you were a successful company, a successful territory that had TV somewhere, and you brought a guy in and he got over fairly good for you and you made a name for him on your television, and then some outlaw promotion starts trying to move into the territory and that guy goes to work for the Outlaws, then it confuses the fans who didn't live their lives then on the internet because there was none. And by the same token, you don't want to reward the guys who do work for outlaw promotions by giving them jobs later on, either in the same territory or if it's the next door territory. Somebody that worked against, for example, when they worked for All South, for Ann Gunkel in Atlanta, those guys knew that they weren't going to fucking easily just go up and work for Jim Crockett in Charlotte because he was an NWA member, just like the established NWA office.
Hey, remember in the 90s, you couldn't work for ECW and Dennis Carluzzo.
Exactly.
Across the river.
And for various reasons and various times, you didn't want to use talent. You didn't want to encourage talent to work for outlaws or to work for people in your territory against you by then giving them a job. And theoretically, if you were connected, like if you were members of the NWA, you would call all those promoters and say, this fucking guy's working for these outlaws that are running against me. Or this guy is doing, in the more modern instance, this guy is doing garbage matches that's getting heat on the entire business of pro wrestling in a state with commission and the regulatory agencies. And we're going to make it known that anybody that wants to work for the more successful, established a company where you could have a bright future by being trained and going to the WWE or whatever the fuck, or instead you're going to work in this fucking roller rink over here, slicing yourself up, and you're not going to get that opportunity. And that was to the point why that until CM Punk got signed by the WWE, he never was ever considered to be booked in OVW because he had worked for Ian Rodden. So it's not like we were excluding, it was just a rule that Danny made, and rightfully so. It wasn't like we were excluding specific talents because they were all the shits, which was most of Ian's crew. It had to be a fucking rule. And conversely, how many times and how many territories did Bob Roop try to steal? When he was
two.
When he was established in very quick succession. What was it, like in a 2 or 3 year period?
It was 78 and 79.
Okay. When he established himself as a talent and was entrusted with either being on top or having a good booking mind and doing some of the booking, and then plotted to steal the territories out from under the promoter because he said they were crooked. He took the job from the crooked people and then tried to steal their promotion that they apparently made with crooked money.
Well, again, in San Francisco was Roy Shire. And the thing was, oh, look at him. He's disgusting. He's awful. Everyone hated him.
Yes, so we must steal from him.
But even he had stooges, and someone turned that plan in. And then he went, and somehow Ron Fuller after that made him the booker. And then when Ron Fuller was busy having a good time down in Alabama, opening that up, Roop was like, hey, why don't we just take Knoxville? We're all here anyway. And Dick Slater called Eddie Graham, who then got word back to Ron Fuller that they were about to steal the Knoxville territory. 2 years running.
Yeah. So it worked both ways. The promoters had to have some, and then Bob Roop didn't work for another established office for a couple years after that. And Watts was always, willing to give everybody a chance from somewhere sooner or later. But
think about it, though. He went from Watts to Ole in 83 when Ole wasn't going to turn him away. And then he didn't return to Florida until after Eddie Graham died. I don't think he was ever going to return there if Eddie Graham had stayed alive.
No. And then that's pretty much it. But nevertheless, there had to be some kind of way for the promoters, and I've been on both sides, so I recognize that both are true. Promoters and wrestlers were crooked at various points. But the promoters would try to keep the boys in line because there was no contract, there was no paperwork. And a guy could come in, and if he got over, there was always the threat that he was going to steal something or muscle himself into a piece, which is why that only, in most territories, only people that were really trusted got to that level. But, at the same time, you needed to keep the boys in line, and there had to be the recourse to keeping the promoters in line was when there was so many of them. When the guys when they felt like they were being fucked, there wasn't a contract, give 2 weeks notice, because then the promoters can't really fucking bitch about what you did, but you were free to go anywhere else, as anywhere you could get booked. And if you were good and could get over, there was 20 different places to book you. So that was the boys' insurance. And, we've lost quite a bit of all of that now. But for various reasons in various places, yes, guys did get blackballed, and yes, guys did steal from the promoters. So it was a charming business back then, instead of all this fucking childishness now.
But again, the promoters weren't the innocent little children or anything. When Austin Idol cashed that check, that's a great moment in wrestling history.
Yes, I mean, it worked both ways. And you always enjoyed hearing heartwarming stories like that because pomposity always needs taken down a peg, right? So wherever it exists, that's fun.
Right. It's interesting to the topic of people being blackballed. And again, I apologize for all the lawnmowers or whatever the hell's going on in the background. It's driving me out of my mind today. But on that topic, different people, Bruno got blackballed once. Roddy Piper has talked about the fact that Ole got him blackballed, got him fired from, he wasn't working for the Carolinas or Georgia for a little while. Again, I'm using their words just to set an example.
Well, no, Bruno's was the historically proven the truth. I think Roddy was a handful for people at one point in time to work for. Or to have work for you. So there was other things. Anyway.
But, there are various things, if you look at things now and you say, like, okay, if I had a company, there are different things that if a wrestler did it, I wouldn't want them to be associated maybe with my brand, my company, whatever it may be. It seems like now there's nothing. It's like you can do, before you get to the big show, you could do any stupid thing you want, and it's just supposed to be blanket forgiveness. And then once you get there, depending on where you work, you may do the same stupid shit over and over again.
Yes.
But, there's like this is too far. Like in terms of what you actually do in the ring. It's too far in terms of some of the things that people do outside of the ring or the behavior, or some of them are just complete derelicts. But in terms of in the ring, like this person went too far. They'll never work here. There isn't anything anymore.
You're right. Unfortunately, there used to be, again, standards and some things, if you did, people would not ever consider giving you, and mostly exposing a business was the biggest one. And you were pretty blanket fucked across the board. Even promoters who didn't like each other could agree on that. But I mean, just no unsavory behavior or stupidity or recklessness or whatever is apparently too far these days for. And again, even if they say, okay, well, he's going to be on national TV now, and I make the point that everything's worldwide television now with everybody's got a phone in their pocket with a camera, a video camera, and blah, 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 and the internet. So even people that would never have been seen or ever heard of outside of one building in Texarkana can now be seen around the world and laughed at and made fun of, probably. But it's the concept of everybody just does everything on every show and nobody pays any attention to the professionalism or lack thereof and still gives somebody an opportunity saying, well, that was on the indies. That doesn't make any sense to me because everybody's seen doing everything. But besides that, it's just there's almost no level of stupidity that these fucking morons can stoop to, that people will still go, okay, but he throws a nice drop kick, so let's book him or whatever. I don't know.
Well, this has been Happy Talk.